For several years now, I've been contemplating an idea about the universe that comes straight out of Genesis. And it wasn't until now that I came up with a name for this idea. I'm calling it Embryonic Universe Theory, okay? And once I started getting more into this, I came up with another theory about space, okay, which I'm calling the Divinic Space Dimension. And what baffles me is, up until now, as far as I know, nobody has come up with a similar idea. The closest I found that is similar to this is a scientific theory. Scientists have come up with this called space bubble, okay. They think the universe is like a bubble, and hence it expanding. So physicists claim that the universe is infinite, but they also claim that it's expanding. So is it infinite or not? That doesn't make sense. It's a contradiction in itself. If something is infinite, then how can it still be growing? It's supposed to be infinite. Also, if the universe is expanding, and apparently there's evidence towards that, with this Big Bang theory, like everything's like expanding outwards, then what's it expanding into? Okay, you need space outside of the universe for that expansion to take place. So the universe can't be infinite if it is expanding. There is something outside of the universe, and well, it's expanding, so that's already an indication that it isn't infinite. It could be infinitely expanding, but it isn't infinite itself. Anyway, I did make some recordings with my phone as I was going through this idea, this new theory of mine, which I'm going to play back now. And I'll be backing it up with scripture. Like I said, this is in Genesis, and I'm amazed that nobody has considered this before.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm just doing a little voice recording here because I've had my own biblical theory on the universe and what is beyond the universe for quite some time now. I call it Embryonic Universe Theory. Now, Genesis says that there are waters above and below. People interpret this to mean the clouds. The waters above is referring to the clouds, which then rain down, but that's not what it says. The waters above are beyond the heavens, and if that's the case, then beyond the universe must be water, like we are all living in some kind of giant embryo. Now, I'm saying this from memory, but I'm going to go to the scripture specifically, what it says in Genesis, and go through that with you now, and why I have this theory. Here we are, straight out of the Greek Septuagint, and I'm just amazed that this has been overlooked. Okay, look at Genesis, right at the beginning, chapter 1, verse 6 to 9. Wait, get a load of this. It tells you. The firmament, okay, is the heaven. Okay, let me go through it fully. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, and let it be a division between water and water." Okay, so the firmament is between the waters, okay? The water below and the water above. And it was so. And God made the firmament, and God divided between the water which was under the firmament and the water which was above the firmament. And God called the firmament heaven. Okay? And what is the Bible often referring heaven to? Space, okay? You have God created earth and heaven, yeah? Genesis 1:1. And the heavens are often attributed to space, alright? So you have God called the firmament heaven, and God saw that it was good. Okay. The firmament, alright, even if it isn't space, but heaven itself, there is water beyond the firmament, okay? Which is really amazing. It's telling you right at the beginning, Genesis 1, not that the waters above is a reference to clouds in the sky, but beyond that, beyond the firmament, which is heaven. So that's why I've come up with my own little theory, guys. I call it Embryonic Universe Theory. I believe beyond the firmament, which is heaven and could be space, is water. The Bible tells us so. So, yeah, pretty amazing theory. I think it's something that physicists seriously need to consider. Why isn't this being looked into? Okay, it's Genesis 1. And God said, let the water which is under the heaven be collected into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And the water which was under the heaven was collected into its places, and the dry land appeared. And God called the dry land earth, and the gatherings of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, you see, this is where we know that when the Bible's talking about heaven, it's talking about space. God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. Now, where does the light upon the earth come from? Oh yeah, that enormous celestial body in where? Space. The firmament, in this context, the firmament of the heaven is a reference to space, where the sun gives light upon the earth, to divide between day and night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be for light in the firmament of the heaven, so as to shine upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights in the firmament, the greater light for regulating the day and the lesser light for regulating the night, the stars also. There we go, guys. The firmament, which is heaven, is talking about space, and beyond the firmament is water. And God placed them in the firmament of heaven, so as to shine upon the earth, and to regulate day and night, and to divide between the light and darkness. And God saw that it was good. and there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. Wow. Check that out, guys. Embryonic Universe Theory. It's accurate, man. The answers are right here. What this also means is that space itself, because it's surrounded by water, is like an enormous bubble. The water that is below the firmament, which makes up the oceans of the Earth, is spherical, yeah? The Earth is a sphere. Therefore, the water beyond the firmament, likewise, would be spherical, and is surrounding this huge space, this big bubble. Now, when you think about it, this bubble theory is actually quite sound, quite scientifically sound. It also explains why it's expanding. And I just looked it up now, and this is a scientific theory that the universe is one giant bubble. So yeah, that's interesting. Science once again agreeing with the Bible, but one thing I bet they're not expecting is that outside of that bubble is water. Another thing to note here is if the firmament is heaven, and heaven in Genesis is a description of space, it mentions the stars and the sun and moon and so on, then I have another theory to go alongside this embryonic universe one, which I'm calling the space dimension. Because when we look at space, we just see black, okay? This vastness of emptiness, as it seems. But one thing I find interesting is everyone's near-death experience. They always recount that their spirit left their body and rose up into the sky. Yeah, the spirit goes up out of the body. Well, where's it going to then? It's going up into space. So yeah, I have another theory called the space dimension, and this dimension that is in space that we can't see, we just see what they call it dark matter, yeah, the void, is heaven in another dimension. And it has to be, because Genesis tells us this, as you can see, and the Bible also tells us that God and his angels reside in heaven. We just can't see them. Now, I don't know if you can trust this, but I've read all three of the books of Enoch. There's a 2 and a 3 as well. I thought that was a bit odd. I know the book of Enoch is in the Ethiopic Bible. It's uncanonized, but it is part of the Ethiopic Bible, okay? But I don't know if it's some occult deception, like with many other books that are coming out now on Amazon, especially. I mean, you see all these books about the Essenes and so on, and a lot of it's Gnostic text, which can't be trusted at all. There's a huge agenda, okay, a huge agenda to deceive with new books that are claiming to be ancient texts, scripture even. So I don't know about Enoch, okay, and I'm really dubious about the second and third books of Enoch. But what is interesting about those is it refers to Enoch himself
Okay, I think in the second book of Enoch, it goes on about space and all the celestial bodies, all the planets and so on, that are angels. And Enoch himself is the earth. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And Enoch also lived 365 days, and there are 365 days in a year. And yeah, the ancients worshipped their gods, like the sun god and the moon god and so on. Now, according to the second book of Enoch, these planets are angels. Yeah. And that's quite interesting, actually, when you consider that the firmament is heaven and heaven is space. And what do we have in heaven? God and his angels. So in another dimension, perhaps, the planets and the stars and so on are actually angels. This is second book of Enoch, and it does kind of corroborate with Genesis. Yeah, and when you consider that space is heaven as a different dimension, yeah, it adds up, it makes sense. Additionally, the behavior of these planets in space does affect our behavior here on Earth. Okay, yeah, it's quite interesting. What happens in space affects us, just like the moon, the position of the moon and so on affects the tides. Well, the planets and everything else that's in space, I think scientists have now proven does have an effect on us. Yeah, each and every individual is affected by everything else that's in space, controlling us, as it were. Well, isn't that interesting? If biblically these planets are supposed to be angels, yeah, controlling the forces of nature, as is the case in Scripture, but also everyone on the earth. Now, this is where it gets a bit complicated. Genesis 20 says, "And God said, Let the waters bring forth reptiles having life, and winged creatures flying above the earth in the firmament of heaven." So, this time, the firmament that is heaven is talking about the sky where the birds fly, okay? But let's not forget that earlier on in Genesis, it also referred to space as being part of the firmament, and there are waters between the firmament. And again in Genesis 26, it says, "The flying creatures of heaven." Okay? So my other theory I called the Divinic Space Dimension, that being heaven, but heaven being a different dimension that we can't see. But the Bible does refer to the sky and space as heaven. Hence why I think it is heaven, the sky and space, but in a different dimension.